All right, so we had a really intense philosophical discussion last week where we really turned all conventional thought on its head. You know, the more you feel spiritual, you must be more spiritual. The more you feel connected, you must be connected. That's what you would think. And last week, chapter 35, we sort of challenged that notion and went along a little bit of a journey to try to see how it might be the opposite. How actually feeling connected doesn't necessarily mean you're actually connected, and not feeling connected doesn't necessarily mean you're not connected. And stressing the idea more that you may be connected without feeling it, and having the feeling be an additional benefit to you. But actually, also in the extreme way, in that the spiritual worlds feel themselves connected. They feel they sense God, they experience God, they appreciate God so viscerally and so obviously to them because they have they're exposed to revelation of God. And therefore, they actually have an impediment to their ability to be a conduit, their ability to be a vessel, because they have their own ideas and their own appreciation that gets in the way of being an empty vessel, which is the physical earth. It does not have its own consciousness of spirituality and God. So we're going to continue that conversation as it relates to kind of the big picture goal of the world. So this is a huge core idea of Hasidic philosophy, especially Chabad paradigm, the Chabad mission, right? Which is really, according to the Tanya, the world's mission. So what is this? There's like one of the 12 Pesukim, when we talked about a few of them in the past chapters. It's in the first reading, except for you. I'm so sorry. You That's and I have the same one.
Okay.
I printed the wrong pages for us. But the first reading, at the very top. In a well-known statement, our rabbis declare that the purpose for which this world was created is that the Holy One, blessed be He, desired to have an abode in the lower realms. So that is in Hebrew, because it's so central. It's right at the top? Yeah, you have right there. That paragraph at the top?
Before the world was created?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Sorry.
Yeah, I guess this is an updated translation.
That's cool. That's great.
Yeah. I'm just gonna.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, this is the noise level. It's okay. Okay, so that is Nis'ava LaHakadosh Baruch Hu. Speaking in Ashkenazi because it's such a classic. Lihiyais laidira zu b'tachtainim. Okay, so Hashem wanted to have a dwelling place in the lower worlds. So that's like, this is the answer to the question, why did God create the world? Right? We have this question, we get there, it's like an outgrowth to the questions that we had in last week's chapter, where we came to that discussion because we were feeling so stuck, or so over it, or so maybe disillusioned, frustrated, like we're here hitting a glass ceiling. What's the point? We can't be a tzaddik, and even if we become a Beinoni, then what? We're just going to be spinning our wheels in Beinoni life forever? And we had this conversation like, okay, so what are we actually accomplishing? And we're continuing that conversation to say, you're part of a larger goal to create a dwelling place for God in the lower worlds. And last week we talked a little bit about lower worlds and how it connects, we're going to continue that conversation. Okay.
It's just striking to me that we're learning this right after, in the past month or 6 weeks, we've really learned again about how the Mishkan was formed, and then we learn again in Deuteronomy, and we see that the action is more in the now, in Deuteronomy, and what is emphasized in Deuteronomy as a whole is the us, is the collaboration, consideration of others, and it's not so didactic.
Right, it's an action-based goal. It's an action-based religion, like I like to say. Judaism is an action-based religion. And it's also going to connect to the giving of the Torah. In this very chapter, Shavuot is coming, the holiday where we celebrate the giving of the Torah. So that's going to actually be come up in the end of the chapter, which I'm excited about. So, okay, so before we talk about, I mean, this is a loaded sentence. We can take it face value and be like, Hashem wanted a world, a lower world. Yeah. What does that mean? So first of all, lower, higher, what is that? Is God less, and this is a review for us, but is God less in the lower worlds than the higher worlds? Don't we have this belief that Hashem is everywhere? What does that mean, lower or higher? So the beginning of the chapter kind of just irons out a possible misconception. No, there's two perspectives. From the perspective of God, Da'at Elyon, like the higher perspective, we're all equally part of his world. He's equally everywhere. From the lower perspective, from recipient's perspective, there is differences in how much the various recipients in various worlds will experience the truth of God. So that's what we mean when we talk about higher worlds and lower worlds. The lower worlds are going to have less of an appreciation. The higher worlds are going to have more. We learned about this in, the Tu B'Shvat with the 4 worlds and the fruits representing the different worlds. These are the same 4 worlds that we're talking about. But in this chapter, we're not really going into the names of the worlds. We're basically differentiating this world and the ones that come before. Because the ones that come before are all in a continuum. More spiritual, less spiritual. More revelation, less revelation. Some more, some less. But it's all in the same continuum. They all have some appreciation. And their existence is very abstract. It's very dependent on the exact recipe of how much they perceive and how much they don't. If any of that balance is altered, they just won't exist. It's like the computer screen is a good example, but it's just like if the ions aren't aligning exactly right, they're not going to be. And they realize that. They're very abstract worlds, they're abstract existences. And we also talked about how they have this appreciation. So what's the difference? In this physical world, the Alter Rebbe uses 3 words to describe the physical world. Here. Okay, it's at the second page. And it's at the second to bottom, so it's our first page, Karen and I. So second to that last line, culminating in the creation. Did you find it? Oh, okay, it's not the second to last line for you. I don't know what happened when I went to print it again. It didn't do the same thing. So maybe you can show me yours.
Sure, whatever.
Thank you. I just want to find where it is so I can tell you. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
So it's the third line from the top, and you and I, it's the right here, yeah. So culminating in the creation of this physical, gross world. So I don't like that translation. I'm going to do my own. So Ad shenivra olam hazeh hagashmi v'hachomri mamash. So there's 3 words used to describe this world. Gashmi means physical. Chomri means material. And mamash means actual.
And what the last one is, mamash is
Actual, yes, actual.
Interesting.
So, I mean, there you can use many words to describe this, but I'll explain to you the differences. So the physical, and it doesn't really matter, but it's just really 3 descriptions, not differences, 3 descriptions of what makes this world different than the others. So physical, those are very abstract worlds. Ours is physical. Yet, even in physical, you can have like, it basically is like the definition of to be able to quantify something. You can quantify in math but it doesn't mean that it's tangible, right? So physical means that you're able, there's a time and space, there's differentiation, delineation, there's boundaries and categories, right? Physical world. Material, you can hear sound, you can see something, that's all part of materialism. Actual is to the point where there's physical touch involved. Our world has those things that the spiritual worlds do not. Well, to some degree, what this world has that those worlds do not is the sense of touch. There are the ideas of speech in the previous worlds. I have to correct myself, and that's what makes it important for the Alter Rebbe to say Gashmi v'chomri mamash, to the point where we have physical touch, physical objects taking up physical space in this world, on this earth.
So these 3 words. So it's 3 words basically.
Yeah, but the idea is what we need to get to, which is that it's a physical world.
I understand.
Yeah.
Just cute coincidence that then also this world is the 3D reality.
Very true. Well, it could actually work. We have the dimension of, those are 3D. But anyway, that actually describes all the physical.
No, it's in my mind.
Yeah, no, that's cute. No, it took me it was interesting for a minute to maybe see if it really corresponded. But yeah, so the dimensions of how we have physical dimensions in our world. We have this book that is, I can pick it up, I can turn the pages. If I forget it at home, I won't have it here. So that's what the physical world is. So physical to the point where somebody can actually live their entire lives and deny the idea that there may be a spiritual creator or there may be spirituality.
Yeah.
The very next paragraph. So much so that it is filled with the klipot and the sitra achra, the second paragraph later, saying, I am, and there's nothing else besides me. You can say that. That's what Pharaoh said. That's his quote. But that's a phenomenon, right? We can all access that ego point of view. It's very easy for us. It's not hard, because that's actually more obvious to us to see who we are and to see the limits of physicality and say, okay, so I must be where it's at. Even a child is born with the predisposition to see the world that way. They are very centric, they self-centric, developmentally appropriate. They see themselves as the center of the world. And I remember actually, I have a very interesting memory, but I don't know how old I was, but I have a memory of realizing that I may not be the only person.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, she also, I feel this and I see this and I know this, but I wonder what it's like for her. And I wonder what it's like for her. And it was like, I remember my world opening up to maybe consider something else. Which is very fascinating.
I have a very similar memory.
Yeah.
I literally remember somehow thinking that everything else is more like robots or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm waking up from that.
Same. You just think and even sometimes I get a hint of it yesterday, at the very same time in somebody else's, let's say I sometimes I go to yoga on 7 p.m., and it's like I looked at my watch, Wednesday 7:30, and I'm like, I'm not at yoga now, but they are.
Yeah.
Right.
The ability to anyways, it's a bit off topic. But
it isn't, because that's a connection to the other. That's a connection to a community that you have on 7 o'clock on certain nights.
Exactly.
And that's something that you move together, you breathe together.
Right, so you do create that certain, where you're
100%.
tuned into their frequency more than
100%.
that's very interesting. Yeah, that's being true. So,
Can I ask a question?
yes,
about the
please
physical?
do. Yeah.
Science, though, teaches us that it's really just, this paper is not just like a solid, right?
It's a composite of the different atoms, and and it does align to a lot of of philosophy, how this all came to be. It's basically creation of something from something. So this paper is rearranged molecules from its original source, and cooking is a great, display of that, where you take, chemicals and different substances and you just mix them up and they create different substances and it's chemical reactions. It's very cool, but you're not creating atoms, right? You're rearranging them. And that actually is a great segue to the next thing, that this all those previous worlds are all in a continuum. More revelation, less revelation. Mm-hmm. There was a huge leap that occurred in the creation of this physical world, where the energy must have been infinite in order to generate something outside of the continuum, because physical matter does not exist on a continuum of spiritual abstractness.
Right.
It's not part of the continuum. It's not like if you continue on the road, you will get to Oz. Like, it's not like that, right? Like, you're leaping. You're like, whoa. How did we get from A to B? Right? It doesn't work that way if you just follow, the same rate of transfer. It doesn't equal matter. So in order to break out of that track and leap into a completely different existence, there had to be some infinite power, the power of creation, the koach hayuli, like the force. I mean, call it the Big Bang, right? It had to be huge. It had to be unlimited energy in order to create this physical world. And that's what we call something from nothing, ex nihilo. So science explains how matter gets rearranged and transferred to one form to another, from frozen to liquid to gas. The water changes in water. That's correct. But can science tell us how the first atom was ever generated?
Not really. They don't know, right?
It starts to go into quantum physics,
yeah.
right? And those are more questions than answers, aren't they? I mean, I haven't studied it, so if you have, maybe enlighten us.
Well, I mean, I haven't, I'm certainly no physicist, but basically, if we can all agree that, and actually I'm quite shocked that that's really how it's written here, that in the beginning, let's say, yes, prior to all of this, there was singularity, there was one, right? Call it God, yes, the divine source. And that frequency, that energy of that source, of that field, was so high that it didn't even make any fluctuations. It's like a straight line, okay? There's no movement in that. It's everything all at once, everywhere. There's no one, nowhere, no thing, no time, basically. It's all at once, everything. And it's, he's saying his light, his, because here we are talking about God, it's filling up every space that then could turn into a possible creation of something, right? Now, then something had to happen. Perhaps it was as simple as a thought, okay?
It was speech, actually.
Well, speech comes later.
Allah b'machshava. It started with a thought. She's right.
Yeah.
It's aligning beautifully.
So
Keep going.
So that thought would create practically a little blip, okay? It's a moment of consciousness outside of the pure consciousness, okay, which was filling up everything. Now, from that, if that frequency it had to slow down, okay, and energy got created, which is still very, very fast, but very close to source. And then from that, it became even slower, which would be patterns. The patterns that we see everywhere in nature, everything has a pattern, right? Whether that's the Fibonacci, it's patterns. And if you would look actually at frequency, we see it as a 2D kind of line on a screen or on a printed, but if you would actually look at this, it would be more like a, what do you call it in English, like kaleidoscope?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you see so that's more like, or when you see the shadow of, I don't know, you got like a hexagon or like more complex structure, but if you would have light on top, on the bottom you would only see, you know, the 2D projection of that, but it is actually a whole complex. It's a pattern. So pattern, and then it would further, the frequency further slow down, and then at some point it would got to the speed of light. Okay, the speed of light was already, like, light particles practically are already tangible. Okay, and from there, that would be the moment of basically the Big Bang, right before that speed of light. It decreased, so it slowed down so much that it had to split up. It couldn't stay anymore in a singularity. So, you know, duality, polarity, anything that then followed, so comes from that moment down. That would be the Big Bang. So that would be the speed of light. And then it went slower until the slowest, most stable form of energy, which is matter. And you know, that's what we basically see. Now here in matter, there is always, the point of it is that it's always based on separation. There's one point of consciousness, let's say you, and there's another point of consciousness, let's say going to yoga, okay? But it can be anything that there exists. Now for you to unite with this other point of consciousness, you have to take action, okay? You have to move your body through space, which is time, yes, to get to that other point of consciousness. And so depending on how far those 2 points are apart from each other, it's either more time, it's either less time. Now all this functions on Newtonian laws, which are predictable. An apple at a certain, you know, size and shape hanging on a tree that will fall down, if the conditions are exactly the same, it will always fall in exactly the same spot. Now if we go to the cellular level, if you really break it down, you know, that's what Einstein, and when they thought that they would react the same, right? The same like the apple, but there's the surprise. It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, our particles, they jump in and out of place, and it's not predictable, and it's, okay, so anyway, that's what I think the biggest proof of source of God is.
Yeah, because we are host the soul, right?
Yes.
So
Anyway,
yeah.
sorry, I made it really
Wow,
Wow,
that was
that's
amazing.
That was amazing.
Well, that was
You are a
very-
physicist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the way you explained that.
It was just because, like, while you were reading it, you know.
Well,
it
so
was
we're
like,
and
so
you're right. Like, so wow. So that was so.
Thank you.
That was so beautifully described.
Yes.
I was like going on a journey of the part, like of the creation of the world.
Thank you.
And thank you for explaining that, because it's so aligned. You can if you don't know what it is, you don't know if it aligns or not, right? But actually hearing this, it sounds like it really does align with what we're learning in the Tanya. Now, of course, the Tanya is going to be focused on the spiritual worlds and then coming into physical worlds, but I don't see a contradiction, especially so according to the Kabbalah, and also I'm not a Kabbalist, so I can't be like, for real source, but there was, actually, I can go by what we just read. Nit'ava lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It uses the word desire. Before even the thought, there was a desire. So God is the oneness, right? That oneness, the oneness of God, according to the Kabbalah and the Torah tradition, is that it's an all-knowing, the source of all wisdom and knowledge is in this oneness. It's God, right? It's the epitome of goodness. That is the oneness of Hashem. And the oneness of Hashem desired to create a world, a physical world. And the process of which to do that was first the desire, and it actually mirrors the way God created ourselves. First we have a desire, then it goes to thought, then thought is speech, and speech action. And speech can be an action as well, yes.
Could we say that desire was like he became aware, like of that possibility?
I wouldn't say it in that way, because that's to assume that God wasn't aware before. And in the Kabbalah, we say that God is the knower, the knowledge, and the knowable. or like the ability to know all in one. So it's not bound by time or space. So we believe that God always knew everything there is to know and is the knowledge of
So,
himself.
so I meant it more like he
Yeah.
became aware of having that desire. See what I'm saying? Because prior to that, he didn't have it, right? He was content.
And I can't answer that because I live, and that actually brings us to the next thing. I and everything on this earth lives within that desire. So I don't know, and that's what actually the Tanya tells us. Like, we're not ever going to be able to understand why he had that desire, because we live within that desire. We are the products of that desire.
It's just that generally, just the word desire seems to me something that is limited really to this reality, while the word awareness, for me, it signifies something that is much more elevated, that would, like desire is almost too little for him, for her, like for,
How about idea? Is that
Well, the Kabbalah actually uses the word desire deliberately.
Okay.
And it's actually, when we think of having a desire, we think of like the desire to scratch your legs, right? And we think it's like low and like we're going to limit ourselves to it. Whereas the desire that's talked about in what we're made aware of is that the at the core of desire is the most purest, one of the most abstract, most pure forms of ourselves, of our expression. So it's because and let's flesh this out.
Concept like God was lonely.
There is that in the Midrash. So the Midrash is like the story form of, it's like Animal Farm, right? It's like the story form of the deepest ideas. So God was lonely is like a cute way to describe this idea, okay? So desire, so we learned about this is a bit off topic, just for the record, okay? Or not off topic, it's more running with some of the ideas that are referenced here in short form. So it's not off topic, but it's a little bit of a side journey. So we learned about the Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, the 7 emotional qualities that relate to our body, and then our 3 intellectual qualities, the wisdom, understanding, knowledge. We learned about that in the beginning of the Tanya. So Keter is the crown, sits above the head. Keter has 2 parts, pleasure and desire. It's the deepest, most abstract forms because they can't be explained. They're above knowledge. So when we have a desire to do something, it's a very, very, very watered down, misappropriated maybe, but it is rooted. If you follow the thread way back, it is rooted in supernal desire. Okay? So in other words, the idea of desire is very abstract, very powerful. The idea to want something, the will, right? Will is extremely powerful. It can get us through, talk about the people in the Holocaust living through hell on earth, living through inhumane conditions for long periods of time that really shouldn't have been survivable, yet some of them had such a strong will, and they credit that as the reason for their survival. Reed's Man's Search for Meaning mentions that explicitly. Because he's like, one of the most powerful, I'm basing this on one of the most powerful pages to me from the book, was where he describes how the conditions were not survivable. It didn't make sense that they would live, they even get hyperthermia and die. Like, there's so many ways to die, like pick 1, pick 10, pick 20, they had them all.
But wasn't that also when he said that if you connect to the purpose, he was thinking about how much he loved his wife, and just
love,
the
desire.
Exactly, and so it's the love. What has love, pleasure, and desire are manifestations of love.
Yeah. Well, love, the way that the
When I say
Kabbalah
pleasure,
describes it is that pleasure and desire actually are the sources of love. Because you love it because it brings you pleasure, and you desire it because it brings you pleasure. And the pleasure and desire are very abstract. You can't explain why something feels good. You can't explain why do you like, think of anything, even in physical world, because everything is part of this. the way Hashem created their bodies were to reflect very abstract ideas. So you can use this the example of loving ice cream. Why do you like ice cream? Why do you love ice cream? Why do you love chocolate ice cream? I don't know, it tastes good. Why does it taste good? I don't know. It just does. It just feels so good. Why? Well, because of the aspects. Okay, but why does that sensation feel good to you? At some point, you're going to hit a brick wall. At some point, you won't be able to explain why. And that's because it's from a place that's higher than why. It's higher than knowledge and understanding and wisdom. It's higher than all of it. It's abstract. So this,
Is
yeah.
that housed in the intuitive?
It's a good question. I think intuition is usually Bina, but intuition,
But
I think, is a portal
still
to
cogitating knowledge, eh?
Yeah.
Right, with Bina?
Yeah. Intuition, I think, is awareness of. Intuition is awareness.
I think it's beyond
Yeah.
language. I think it's beyond language.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know.
Yeah,
Sorry,
it could be-
I don't want to
It's
get
like
us
you
off
feel
topic.
it, but you don't know
Yeah.
how to
You know what? I
explain
think you
why.
may be right. Like,
No,
We-
I don't know.
I think-
I just asked for
I
advice.
think intuition is an English word that I think if you can use it in this context or maybe also out of context.
Great answer.
Yeah. There are times that we feel, and I think that what I think you're describing is there are times that we feel very, very convicted that something is good, something is right, something is the way it should be, or something is like, why do I want to, I have, for example, like I had very intuition that we must put the walnut doors in the mikveh. Like, I mean, and then later on I was like, oh my God, walnut has a lot of representation, by the way. But we must have walnut doors in the mikveh. And like, budget didn't like that at all. And in the past, or maybe with other things, I would have been like rational. Like, no, it's rational. Like maybe it's not, it doesn't make sense. It's not, bang for buck. And maybe it's, and I was like, my intuition says we must have walnut doors in the mikveh. And I can tell you why, but besides for why, there is something intuitive here. So yeah, that intuition is desire, right? Maybe that intuition is like, I know that there's a reason beyond reason this is correct. So maybe that's what you're describing. Again, we're going on lots of tangents, but here we are. Why not? So, but to bring it back, actually, it's a good spot. So, I want to get back to something that... that's what I wanted to say. Okay. So, why Hashem wanted to create a physical world, why he had the desire, we won't know. Because we're part of that desire, we're products of that desire. We're part of the world that God created from that place of desire. Yet, we can understand and appreciate how that might feel.
Experiment.
So in other words, we won't be able to explain why taste tastes, why we like, why does things taste good? Why is taste pleasurable? Why are delicious things pleasurable? Maybe we won't be able to explain that, but we will be able to explain why certain foods taste good. Okay? Maybe that's a good example because because we can understand some of the phenomenon.
Right.
So, what is that? There's a light. We use the example of light a lot, and we're going to use a few examples. So, light is appreciated for the most part, but where is it more appreciated? When you turn on a light in a light room, or when you light a candle in a dark room, right? So what Hashem was basically doing was creating a world of contrast.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So that the light in the place of contrast, that's where it's at. Versus, So, okay, I'm going to give more examples that are a little bit more to the point. That was just a little opener. Okay, so we talked about the continuum, right? Like the previous worlds are existing on a continuum. More revelation, less revelation. Whoa, I lost my train of thought again. Yeah, they're like a gray area, okay? So they're like a bunch of gray, like, maybe they exist less, maybe they exist more. But where is there the contrast? Where is there the darkness where we can exist and think that we exist on our own and, independently, like Aniva Afsio, like Pharaoh said, I am all there is to be, extreme ego. Where is that existing? On the physical world that was created with the infinite light to get there, right? That's where it's a big deal. That's where we can find that when physical beings that are created to be able to deny God as existing or important or truth, when we find that truth, when we find that spirituality, when we find that's when it's turning on a light in the darkness. But if we were to, so this is something fascinating, and we're going to go back and forth to, from all ends. So this is what the Kabbalah calls Yerida Tzorech Aliyah, a descent in order to ascend. So the way that we describe this in a very simplistic way is that in order to jump, in order to do the high jump, you need to first bend your knees. In order to do the sprint, sometimes you take a step backwards for momentum. A slingshot, retract it, and then it can move far ahead. What Hashem is doing in each of the worlds, the spiritual worlds that come before, is he is contracting himself, right? He's limiting, he's restricting his own revelation so that there's a little bit of more and more consciousness. But if Hashem were to stop there, if Hashem were to say, okay, I've created the worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, these, or not Asiya, but these spiritual worlds where there's angels and there's some consciousness and there's, abstract existence, and stop there, what would be the point? He would be concealing himself for no reason. It's kind of like starting a business. You make an investment, and then, if you make, the investment can hurt sometimes. Maybe you're pulling together all your savings, you're taking out a loan, and you're trying to accomplish something, so you put in this investment. It's a yerida. It hurts. You have to, during this time you may be just living on a tighter budget because you just extended yourself. You just made a very big investment. If you were to chicken out halfway through and be like, listen, I can't live like this anymore, I'm cashing out, what would be the point? It would be a waste of your time, right? What would be the point of your investment? But if you stick it out a little bit longer and you go further into the investment, further in the hole, and then you stick it out to the point where it's now profitable, then you've gotten the return on your investment. So the yerida, the investment is the descent, right? It's harder. It's a harder life when you're in the middle of that process. But then if you stick it out long enough, the investment, the descent, can be in order to ascend. You can become a billionaire, possibly.
Also, at the same time, when you are down, it's easier to lose faith.
That's because it's a real descent.
So many people that go through very hard time, they say, you know what, God not exist if He gave me this problem or trouble or whatever it is.
Because it's real. Because the descent isn't for pretend. They're real, right? So they wouldn't, if it was rigged, then it wouldn't be a real challenge. The challenge is, you can go either way in that challenge. They're both possibilities. You can see it this way, you can see it that way. It's a real test. So the descent.
The question is, why to test to begin with?
So hold that thought, because I just want to finish this thought before I lose my train of thought. So so I'm using an example of a business to explain how this physical world is the point. Because if God were to stop at any of the spiritual worlds, then it would be a descent for the sake of nothing. Right? Well, why? So you created angels, so you have spiritual robots praising you? That's all what you wanted, God? You wanted to create spiritual robots to praise you? It's like the people who have, some sad existence person that doesn't have any real friends, so they create you, so they tell people, okay, you say, I love you to me, you tell me I'm good. Like AI, like having an AI friend. Okay, that's a perfect example, right? Great, so you've got an AI friend. You're so popular. You made it, right? So that's what the spiritual worlds are. They're AI. They're robotic. They have no choice. They have just the right amount of awareness, just not enough, just the right amount of awareness, just the right amount of existence to be robots praising God, designed as such. They don't have freedom of choice. The descent had to go so far to the point where we do have freedom of choice on this earth, and we do have the ability to not say, to go through a test and decide that means that God doesn't exist. We do have that ability. It's a very real possibility. It's a very logical possibility, actually. That's the state of descent where the return on investment can occur. And it makes all that worth it. So let's talk about this earth, what it's like for us. So last week we did a lot of that. And this week we're going to do it again. So last week we talked about the mitzvah being that, that infinite ability to do that. This week we're talking about the Torah. So the mitzvahs from last week, as a review. The mitzvahs, every time we do a mitzvah, the mitzvah is a command by God. It's his inner will. We were talking about, we've talked about in the past inner will versus outer will, right? So when God created the spiritual world and the physical world, he wanted to. But did he want the robots? Is that the point? This different words to describe the same thing. Did the whole point of creation was to create the angels? No, he wants the angels to be there. But that's a means to an end. So that's external will. It's the same thing like when you want, I want to go to work today, or I want, do you want, but is that your end goal to go to work today? Or is your end goal, what is your end goal, right? And you can ask that. It's a good exercise actually, in life to ask yourself, what do I really, really want? And then you find, then once you do that exercise, you might start to have an appreciation for the power of desire. What do I really, really, really want? So does Hashem really, 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 wait, I talked about this in the past with graphic design. Do I really, really love, creating graphic design posters for different events? No. I want to do it because I know how important it is to get to the end goal of having a beautiful event that everybody knows about and comes to and enjoys. So, even the cooking, like I love to cook. It's part of the end goal. So with Hashem, he created all these worlds. He wants them to be here, but the end goal is pnimiyus haratzon, is pnimiyut haratzon. The internal core will is this mechanism of when we do a mitzvah. That's what he did. That's his craving, his deepest desire. When we do a mitzvah, we're like unleashing this spiritual energy in this physical world, and it's like a chemical reaction that occurs. Yeah. But the Torah is, let's find the quote. It's so beautiful.
Wow.
There's a few of them. The Torah is Torat Chaim. It's so hard to figure out. It's page, I think it's going to be page 6. If you see at the bottom, it says like 6 of 9, or maybe 7 of 9. Check. Yeah, at the very bottom, you'll have like a little fraction. Do you see that? Doesn't have it.
Start with? How did it start?
It says, as we say in our prayers, for in the light of your countenance, you gave us a Torah of life. Is it?
paragraph.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
I need it. Yes, okay.
Yes. Okay, so I brought this cute little novel. It's a historical novel set in the time of the Spanish Inquisition. And it has a cute thing. I actually just read it to Hebrew school yesterday. I'm not going to read it here, but what it's about is this Marano is very high up in the government, and he's telling his his teenage children for the first time that they're Jewish. And he's scared because how are they going to take it? They can turn him in, right? He has a very devout Christian practicing daughter. He couldn't stop her because then it would incriminate himself. It's a very, very difficult place to be in. So he tells them a story about the keepers of the water, how there's this valley, and in this valley there's this stream of magical waters that prevent any ailments and just perfect health. But the water is bitter, so the kids get used to this water when they're young, and then they love it and they live by it. And anyway, so the king says, but it's so sad that people outside of this valley don't have the water. So he sends them all over the world to share the water, but the other people of the world think it's better and they don't want it. So they're like, okay, so they said, okay, we'll drink the water and we'll improve the world with ourselves. So they do that, and they rise to success wherever they are because they're drinking the water. And but then the people of the world start to get jealous of their success. So instead of drinking the water, they start to outlaw the water. And they say, if you drink the water, you're going to be punished by death. And what's the water? The Torah. So that was his cute little analogy in the novel. But I just found it to be so descriptive because it's like it's been called a manual, like, an instruction manual. It's been called, what else? I wrote down some ideas to myself in case I forgot, and I did. Questions if I can find where I wrote it. Yeah, I think I got it.
The people of the book concept?
Yes, exactly that concept. Yeah, there it is. It's been called a blueprint, or like a secret recipe, or magical waters, right?
Or dew.
Dew, right? In this chapter is called Dew, the revival dew. I'm going to talk about that. Did you see that it's in the chapter?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm very.
So the dew is really, really cool. We're going to get to it. So so it's basically like this. We are in a very, very physical world with a very, very big goal. And the Torah is like this elixir from pre-creation, which is its truth. It's our scriptures tell us that the Torah existed before the creation. And actually God looked to the Torah, this is again in the Midrash, like the stories that express. So the Midrash says that God looked in the Torah in order to create the world. So we have like honor your parents, so God created families with parents. God, keep kosher, so God created food to keep kosher with, So the world was designed to be a
Foreground to practice the mitzvahs.
exactly. It's like the soccer field, right, where we can actually accomplish all the things, right? And that's why the angels wish they can be, and that's why people who pass away wish that they can be back, on earth doing the things, doing the Torah in action. They can study Torah. We have the stories that there's yeshivas in heaven where they're studying Torah all day and all night, and how wonderful it is for them. But they want to put Torah into action, which is what we can do on this earth, which is really the chapter of 35. Chapter 36 is all about. It's really leading us to the macro, to where the world is headed with all this. So chapter 35 is more in a private way, like how we can accomplish in our every tiny action is the purpose of creation. But in a macro, how does my action accomplish the purpose of creation? Because every action is bringing more and more awareness of Hashem into the earth. Because every action, every mitzvah that we do has staying power. It's not fleeting. And when did that, and I'm going to get to the end and get back. So the end goal is Mashiach, the Messianic era. The Messianic era is when it's, the There's lots of midrashes, lots of stories of what it's going to be like. Money will grow on trees. I don't know about that. But we know there will be peace. We do. But what's the point of the matter? Why is it the end goal? Why is it the hugest accomplishment? Why are we headed there? Because it's the completion of the purpose of creation, where the awareness of God will be permanently accessible. It won't be fleeting. It won't be anymore a challenge, right? When we, and that's what we mean. Maybe privately, in other words, there is an end goal in a macro sense. We will get there. We will make it in a collective way, in way of all of history getting to a certain point. And that point is where the knowledge of God will be filled like water fills the sea. Will fill the earth like water fills the sea. It will be apparent. We will walk around on a physical earth having profound awareness and experience of Hashem. Without dying. And that's what brings us to the Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. So first of all, okay, I'm going to talk about the giving of the Torah first. So the giving of the Torah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say the Torah, do you mean the 5 books that he gave Moses, or you mean the Kabbalah?
Very good question. Really, really good
Because
question.
You say
I
that
mean
he
all of it.
created the Torah before the world, so he knew already the stories of Egypt and the story of whatever is in there.
Well, don't forget, Hashem is not bound by time. So he knows everything. Like for us, we're playing it out, but for him, it's intuitive knowledge. It's like you know.
I mean, even again in quantum physics, they
There's
agree
no
that there
past,
is no
present,
time and space. You know,
Yeah.
like so, everything would be all at once. So that's not difficult to imagine that you,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I mean, I can give you little examples about that, but maybe if we have time at the end, because I know we're running out of time and there's a chunk left. So
Ironic, we're running out of time.
So the giving of the Torah was a smaller form of the Messianic era. It was like a preview, or like a glimmer of what was going to happen in the end of days, in the Mashiach times. So how is that? Actually, until that point, before the giving of the Torah, spirituality was so fleeting that it did not have staying power. So if somebody were to, if the forefathers who had intuitive knowledge of the Torah, even though it wasn't given yet, if they were to, make a pair of tefillin, that tefillin wouldn't be holy. It wouldn't have any status. They also, were taught, Abraham taught people about monotheism. Those people, it didn't last. They didn't become Jewish people. They didn't become a nation at that time. It was like they got it for a second and then they moved on. At the giving of the Torah was when the first stage of intertwinement, of combination, staying power of spiritual and physical. We're taught the Elyonim yardu l'tachtonim, the upper worlds went down to the lower worlds. God came into the world so that if I write a Torah on a piece of parchment, the Torah is holy, right? It has staying power. If I do a mitzvah, I consecrate that time and that space forever. That energy will always be here. I will always have that part of me that did that mitzvah, right? There's actual staying, lasting accomplishment of every mitzvah that we do, starting with the giving of the Torah. And that was illustrated with the way that they were on a mountain, the mountain reached up, and then the Shekhinah came down in the cloud, physical cloud, and we had the thunder and the lightning and the world and the earthquake, the world shake. This is all part of the midrash, the stories.
And the sounds of the shofar.
And the sound of the shofar, and we're taught that the animals, another midrash, that the animals were quiet. Nature stood still to receive this. And we're also taught in the actual Torah, the written Torah, it says, Ro'im et hakolot. They saw the sounds. What does that mean? So Rashi tells us what the oral Torah says. The oral Torah says that it means that they saw what was heard and heard what was seen. So you can say that means they saw the thunder and heard the lightning. But spiritually, it means that their senses were shaken up, not on the continuum. They didn't like, wow, I saw amazing sights, or I heard amazing sounds. No, it was, I heard amazing sights. I saw amazing sounds. It was beyond physical, yet within physical. Because you're still talking about sights and sounds. So Hashem was within the earth, yet above and transcending at the same time. And we got to experience that at the time. And we heard God speak. And now I'm getting to the do. We heard God speak. And when we heard God speak, our souls departed from our bodies because our bodies still were physical and we couldn't handle it. But what God did was he took the dew of the Torah, the dew of the resurrection of the dead. This is probably metaphorical, but who am I to say? And used it, this is part of the Midrash, okay? Used it to revive the Jewish people's souls. And then they heard the second commandment, and the same thing happened again. And then they were revived again, and then they asked Moses to do the rest. They died twice. They heard the first two commandments directly from God. Every Jew there was a prophet. And then they were revived. And the commentary says, what is this dew? This dew was the dew of the Torah. So the first two commandments, this is answering your question. The first two commandments, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, number one, I am Hashem your God, therefore, please do everything that I say to do. All the do commandments are included within that. Don't worship idols. Don't do anything that I say not to do, because basically you're saying that that there are other things more important than me. That's idol worship. So everything like that is included in the second commandment. So when Jewish people heard the first two commandments from God's voice, they heard the entire Torah from God's voice. And then it was fleshed out later on with Moshe being on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, and then teaching those teachings to the Jewish people, and then eventually being written down, the written Torah, and then 2,000 years later, the rest of the oral Torah started to be written down as well. So, but all the Torah in energy form was given at that moment, written, oral. It's two parts of the same pie. It's just two halves of the same whole. And we can have a whole class of why God engineered it that way, because it's brilliant, but outside of the scope. So,
and that was after they screwed it up the first time, and the golden calf, and
that's the next thing. Great segue. So what happened then? 40 days later, Moshe goes on the mountain. He studies the Torah. While he's studying the Torah on the mountain, the Jewish people don't know how to integrate what they just experienced. They just experienced, it was like the giving of the Torah was an imprint on the world of what could be. And it was the first stage. When Mashiach comes, that will be solidified and engraved and etched and permanent, that amazing higher awareness. They had that awareness, and it had some staying power, but it was still fleeting for them. And they didn't know how to integrate that amazing insight that they got. So they went crazy, and they worshiped the golden calf. We can have a whole, I think we can identify, honestly. Sometimes we have little glimpses of a spiritual world. Maybe it's through meditation, or maybe it's through a life experience. And it feels like, how can I ever experience like the physical minutia, of day-to-day life, and feel I'm privy to that there's so much more. It's so clear to me in this moment. Yet that moment is supposed to pass, since we're physical beings, and then it doesn't last forever. When the Mashiach comes, it will. Okay, that's where we're headed. And so they did worship the golden calf. And after that point was when we were, it was almost like when Hashem gave the Jewish people the Torah, it was maybe a chance to take the high road, but it became very clear and apparent that there's no substitute for the hard work. And there's no shortcuts. So even with all that revelation, there's no substitute for working with the triggers, doing the mitzvahs, physical action, and that's what we're still doing today, since then. And what questions? I would love to read this reading here that's jumping out at me. Since they, the 10 Commandments. Wow. I would love to go to this page. It may be 6, it may be 7. What's different for you?
Since they, the 10 Commandments,
Yes.
it's the last page.
Okay, so great. So this is a great place to start. Maybe even a little further up, where it says, "So it is written, and all the people saw the thunder. They saw what is normally heard. As our rabbis explained, they looked eastward and heard the divine speech issuing forth, saying, 'I am Hashem, your God.' And so too, turning toward the 4 points of the compass above and below, they heard the words coming from every direction." So this amazing multi-sensory experience and sound coming from every side, it was overwhelming the earth, yet being within the earth. As explained also in the Zohar, the Kabbalah, there was no place from which he did not speak to them. It was coming from all, it's a very big audiovisual event. This was so because in the 10 Commandments, his blessed will was revealed. Or we talked about the inner will. Since they, the 10 Commandments, comprise the entire Torah, which represents the inner aspect of his will and wisdom, the Pnimius HaRatzon, where there is no concealment of the countenance whatsoever. As we say in our prayers, "For in the light of your countenance you gave us a Torah of life."
So if the Torah is God unconcealed,
Yeah.
why is it so hard to figure out what's in it?
Why is it so, maybe so that we can interact with it more and, wrap our brains up in it?
Well, and I thought God isn't really giving us the whole thing all at once.
Well, that brings us to what Liat was talking about, how the written Torah and the oral Torah. So, and we're pretty much at the end. So, the written Torah and the oral Torah, I just talked about this in Hebrew school, so it's a theme. It's brilliant because we know that we cannot learn how to be a doctor from a textbook. So if we were only to have the textbook, we'd have textbook doctors, which I wouldn't go to one, right? Yet the textbook is the gold standard. We can go back to that. The oral Torah is like medical school. It's like residency. It's like internship. It's like learning on the job. It's like applying all the details and it says that, but but what does that actually mean, right? So that's the oral Torah, and they're meant to be together. One needs the other for an authentic understanding of what's happening. So the oral Torah is the real meat and potatoes, the real understanding, the real integration of how and where and what and why, all the details. The written Torah is like a placeholder. It's like, it's the text, so we can just match it back in.
And the oral Torah is like the debates and the
Exactly.
growth
All
Exactly.
the different generations.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what's, and it's one.
Mhm.
So it's all of us. As we
Through the
engage in it,
generations.
it's all
The
of us.
amazing thing that when you actually study the Talmud, and you go through the debates and everything, it strikes me. I haven't done that much study of it, but even the little bit that I've done, it struck me how they're really all agreeing. They agree on way more than they disagree about. The written Torah and everything that the Torah stands for and everything that the spirit of the Torah stands for is not questioned.
That's right.
It's like they're arguing about how is the best way to apply that same goal. They agree on the goal. They agree. I would love to maybe bring an example and do maybe a sample Torah
Like
study.
extrapolation
Beryl,
on purpose.
yes.
Hi.
Hi, Beryl, photographer. Yes.
Question,
Yeah.
if there's still time. And I would have asked this last week about the mitzvahs.
May I?
Yeah. Go ahead. Beryl's joining us.
I take my sunglasses off just to not be so happy.
Hmm.
So, if this world is so complete that someone could easily think I am and therefore, and there's nothing else, basically, which would be the animal soul really relishing, right, in this complete creation where it can really function and thrive. And then to become aware that in such a world, there's the source, God, beyond this, and our godly soul, and in action to choose constantly in the present to bring forth what the godly soul would channel us to do, which here I would say that it would also be in connection basically to Torah, what the Torah would prescribe you to do, but also probably this is inscripted in our godly soul, I would say. I think that somehow it seems to me that the Torah would be something we already know. You know, it's more like remembering it rather than...
Oh my God. So this is in the chapter even.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my question then is there anywhere a distinction made between performing these mitzvot, with that intent, with basically that it's not the action of the mitzvot, like I'm doing this, but because I want to be a good, but it's not with that heart. It's not in that connect. Like, is there somewhere this reference that we're channeling that godly soul forward in our action rather than performing acts
They've
that are
divorced from our
yes,
awareness.
Like, is there? I don't know if I'm making a mess of it, but like,
if I understand
do you see what,
correctly.
Is there this distinction made? Like, someone that would constantly be performing all kind of mitzvahs, but that would not be with their heart in it. And I have many examples I could come up with.
Absolutely.
Things to do. Yeah, is there
And people can also do things that, they can do mitzvahs in a way that and then act in ways that are not in line with the spirit of what we're trying to accomplish. Some people do that, actually.
And even if they, would,
some
but
people
in
are
their
very
inner
bad
world,
salespeople of Torah.
But in their inner world,
Yeah.
they would not really be aligned with that, because that concealed.
So the answer is,
that we have.
so thank you for your question. I think your question is there a in the next few chapters, we're talking about the divorcing the action from the intent of the action, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, the intent.
So
Mechanical Judaism.
Yes.
Oh,
So
yes.
we're talking about, so in a later chapter, I think in,
Liturgical.
yes.
I actually thought what you were asking was, are you sometimes performing the mitzvahs because your godly soul is like working, or are you performing the mitzvahs in order to connect with your godly soul? That's what I thought you were going.
Okay, no, so I was going with that, but this is a
That's a
very
good
beautiful
question,
addition,
too.
and actually that gives me a bit of,
An answer almost.
Yes, it's very beautiful.
Yeah.
So thank you for adding that.
So that's actually could be the answer, in other words. But the idea of remember we talk about nuance. We always have to have nuance in the study of Tanya, because if we take it literal, overly literal, mitzvahs are the best thing ever, then we talk about Torah being the best thing ever. We're going to be like, what? So from one aspect, the mitzvahs are amazing. From one aspect, the Torah is amazing. From one aspect, mitzvahs are important even if they're divorced from the intent, because they're still accomplishing something. On the other hand, you are missing the point. Mm-hmm. And in a later chapter of the Tanya, we are going to talk about how mitzvahs are a body and the intent is the soul. Or mitzvahs are like the angels and the intent is the wings that make the angels fly. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're missing the point. If you're doing mitzvahs by rote and it's completely incongruous with what's on your mind or in your psyche and and the rest of your how you lead your life, and then it's sad. That's the best word I can use to describe it. It's missing opportunity for connecting with what is actually occurring, and therefore maximizing which is what's occurring. If that was the the end of the game, then why would we have our stories of our sages, and all of their piousness and all of their, the stories that we tell, that we're told and that we tell our children, are stories of elevated human beings that are connected with the importance of every Jewish soul and kindness, and the connected to, meditation and introspection. And, Beryl's grandfather was famous for meditating for hours
His
before
yahrzeit was
davening.
yesterday.
His yahrzeit was yesterday. Look at
Yeah.
that. He would meditate for hours. He would study and study and study.
Don't try it at home.
And then by the time he davened, like the morning prayers, I think it was afternoon.
Yeah.
And then he would go straight to the afternoon prayer and straight to the all in one shot. Not because he was lazy, on the opposite. That if there was no point to any of that, then we wouldn't have that as our. Of course we have that. Of course that's what's like so important and so worthy. At the same time, we also recognize the power of the action of the mitzvah, even if. So it's not that it's only about the action, it's that it's so much about the action that even if you are at the state where you're not able to access all of that intent, you can still act. And that brings us to what you said, which is maybe through the action you create the feedback loop in the other direction. Like when you sometimes just putting on a smile helps you improve your mood. It's like the somatic working the other way around, where we want to create healing. Sometimes we change our body posture and then invite.
If I may.
Yeah, please.
If I may, what comes to mind is like good and healthy habits, like in wellness in today's day and age. So let's say going to the gym or working out. So you can have a person that will go to the gym every day, and then as soon as they're done, they'll go and have a plate of fries and cookies, and you're like, why are you ruining everything? But by keeping that habit, there's then an opportunity that when they will be inspired, it will all align.
Mm-hmm.
But if they don't go to the gym,
but if they have an all or nothing attitude and
then
they say, I'm going to eat the fries anyways, why should I go to the gym?
Right, so exactly. So then there isn't that opportunity that when other things align. So mitzvahs alone without passion and the connection are missing a lot. Mm-hmm. You could almost say it's like it's walking into a room and there's no music and there's no light, and it's there, but it's mechanical, it's dry. And that's one of the big
that's actually historically
of Tanya. That's what
historically
Tanya came to do.
What the Jewish life was like before the Alter Rebbe introduced this 300 years ago was like that in a general sense. People were really disinspired. There was lack of energy. It was a product of a lot of persecution. And it was time for a revitalization and a re-energizing of the Jewish people. So what the Alter Rebbe did was he taught and shared this deeper tradition that until that point was only privy to the select few had access to the tradition and the study. And he went and he taught it, and he wrote a book, and he taught it to everyone who wanted to learn it, and he got a lot of pushback for that from the.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that. It's just because I thought in meditation, to go closer to the grandfather, there's so many moments where it almost feels like, you can access a glimpse of that unity, of that compassion, and I don't know, almost like access a higher version of yourself that, my whole attempt in daily life is to try to bring more of that version of me forth,
Yes.
in my awake world, let's say,
Yes.
in my just interactive world. Anyway, somehow
Well, that makes sense. That's exactly what.
like that seed is there somehow,
Yeah, that is exactly what the giving of the Torah story is there to illustrate for us. That they experienced this amazing revelation. There was like no going after I see that. Like I can't unsee it, right? You'd think they would be able to unsee it. Yet we were designed that the hard work you can't avoid it.
No.
You can't bypass it. So even though they had that amazing, life-shaking event, they still, because they weren't able to integrate it, fell very far. So the real magic is in the integration. And when we integrate our entire life and the lives of the people before us for thousands of years has been all about this, to the point where at certain point, it will add up. It will add up, we're promised that. that it will add up to the point where we will arrive.
If I may add,
Yeah.
one practice, one ancient Hasidic practice was to use the moments of meditation and reflection and inspiration and to decide on one small practical good resolution that would be the takeaway from that spiritual high, so that it was anchored, that even after that you come down from the spiritual high and you're down back to the world of action,
The world of
emptying
action.
dishwasher and
Yes.
whatever it is, dealing with the traffic on in Georgetown, whatever that daily thing is, and you're like, I'm late, right? All that stuff, right? But if you take a resolution, it could be something very small, that's going to be your connection point that always anchors you back and says, this is how I'm going to channel that inspiration in a small way. So
At each meditation?
it doesn't have to be each meditation, when it feels right. If it feels right, if
If you're feeling like maybe
Yeah.
when you feel like you need an integration, this is a good time to take the living waters of the Torah, right, which have the mitzvahs in them as their their action department, and maybe use that as a suggestion. Yeah.
One of the things about meditation in ancient Indian sutras, which are just little aphorisms, not just, is that about meditation. When you meditate, you are reaching up, outward to oneness. You always have one hand, or one wing is actually the way it's written, metaphorically up, flying upwards, and one wing still tethered to the earth, because you are here for a reason, and you are to integrate the spiritual, transcendence, whatever awareness that you garner, and integrate it into the now. And if you just
The Rebbe's, when he gave a mimer, he always had a handkerchief that he would hold on to, because he was a conduit for such deep spiritual flow, and he would anchor. And honestly, when you said this story about the itching, I didn't think it was so negative. Like, I feel like it was your animal soul saying, I'm still here. I'm still here. I'm still alive. I'm still in a physical body. And you were able to look at it from your place of awareness and say, I'll attend to you in a couple minutes. But it was kind of like, okay, and then you attend to it because you are a human being and you are, in a body, and that's okay, right? We can, right? Isn't that, that's what I thought of when you said you had to itch. It was like, I said grounding,
That's compassion.
Right?
For yourself.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
That's a mitzvah.
because actually part of the chapter talks about the sons of Aaron, who, and I'm not going to get into it because it'll come back. We'll have more opportunities to talk about it. But they died because they offered the sacrifice, the incense, when they weren't supposed to. And they talk about theirs was a beautiful sin. Because it was so, they wanted to connect to God, and they knew that they weren't going to be able to live through that, and they went anyways. Like they wanted to transcend permanently. But we're taught it was still a sin. It was beautiful, but it was still not the way, because the way is, and we talk about, and this chapter, I'm glad that we're still here, because I do want to say, important point of the chapter, that when the Messianic era does occur, the ultimate stage of it will be when the dead is resurrected. And why is that so important? Well, if we are digesting what we have been talking about over the past few chapters, and even the entire Tanya, we are able to understand now that the ultimate isn't to be a soul basking in the afterlife. The ultimate is to be a soul in a body, basking in the afterlife with our body. So the Olam Haba, the world to come, can mean the afterlife, after death, but it can also mean the Messianic era, when we will be, all the souls will be back in bodies, and we'll all be living a perfect spiritual life within our bodies. That's a great place to conclude.
So they'll all be able to do the mitzvahs again.
That's right.
Got it.
That's the real ultimate.